He's graduated in architecture from VNIT and went to the USA, where he completed his master's in architectural design from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He was awarded the JII Best Interior Design Award by the IIA in 1998 and IIA CAF Young Architects Award in 2000. He was also awarded the Orange City Achievement Award in 2009 and State Level Excellence in Architecture and Education Award by the IIA Maharashtra chapter. So over to you, sir, now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for, first of all, inviting me to this FDP TRP, the TRC Bhopal. I am a little indisposed today and having a little throat congestion and asthma. So I will not be probably able to speak in a louder or a more clearer voice, but I'll try my best to do, and I hope I am audible enough to all of you.
Yes, sir, your voice is very clear.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
All right, thank you. I have been practicing, I've been believing in the principles of vernacular architecture and traditional wisdom since I started my practice. And I'm trying to follow whatever little I can and whatever little understanding that I have of vernacular in my projects that I've done over the last 30 years. It's a continuous learning process, and although I'm not an urban designer or an urban planner, I will not be able to speak much about the traditional growth pattern of cities or the way our settlements grew over a period of time. But I will definitely talk of the vernacular practices and the traditional construction techniques that existed and that I have learned over a period of time. And I will try to share whatever thoughts that I have with all of you. And I hope you will get enriched by the workshop that is being conducted on a topic which is very close to my heart. I'll share a presentation. Just a moment. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, sir, your screen is visible.
Right. So I will just try to explain to the participants and my colleagues here what do I understand from vernacular and what is my concept about the relevance of vernacular in a contemporary context. This is not necessarily applicable to everyone or not necessarily acceptable to everyone, but this is what I have over a period of time understood and learned about vernacular and how I've tried to incorporate the principles of traditional wisdom in a contemporary framework. So first we start with what is vernacular and what, where and why, and what is its relevance in contemporary context. So what are my understanding of vernacular is that structures made by empirical builders without the intervention of professional architects through traditional wisdom. The word professional architects is a very recent phenomena of the modern world, and architects were not known as architects probably. Earlier, they were master builders and master construction masons and so on and on. And so buildings which were built empirically, that's a very important understanding of the word, that the development that happened through a period of time, and which is based on local needs and construction materials reflecting local traditions. And it evolves over a period of time to reflect environmental, cultural, technological, and historical context in which it exists, and is understood inherently by a select group of people who are responsible for its evolution. This, to me, is the fundamental, fundamental premise on which vernacular, anything that is vernacular, not only vernacular architecture, but vernacular exists, which is understood inherently by a select group of people who are responsible for its evolution. Now, to give you an example, the importance of a Mangal Sutra for a married lady is understood by Indians as a whole, or probably the region as a whole, but the importance and the seminal importance that it has in the cultural framework of our country is not understood by maybe foreigners or Europeans or Americans or whatever. It's only a symbol for them, but the evolution of that Mangal Sutra and what it signifies is known and understood by a select group of people. Similarly, if we go across the country, if we go to a smaller group, we'll understand there's so many things which, which probably we don't, even being Indians, understand. So that is the essence and the spirit of vernacular. So vernacular architecture, now what is vernacular? I mean, these images all of you have seen. My net bandwidth is very low, so the images are not getting generated very easily and faster. So you may have a little blurred images. So I mean, these examples, we have all of us have seen these examples which have so organically grown over a long period of time as the needs changed, as the needs, newer functions came into complexity of settlements, the architecture adapted to it. And the growth was very synchronous with the needs and the functions and the aspirations and the availability of materials and the techniques that were available with the human beings at that time. Now, time frame in which vernacular evolves is also very important. It is wholly indigenously grown and never imported. And in these days of rampant globalization and industrialization and the open trade that exists amongst countries, the relevance of vernacular is lost because vernacular can never be imported. It has to be indigenously grown in a community or in a region. And vernacular architecture is seldom at a large scale. I mean, although we have seen settlements like the Wadi Hadramaut in Yemen or Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, or the river valley civilizations, which were large settlements. But the essence of vernacular always lies in being polite and very humble and very subtle. The nomadic, aboriginals, indigenous, traditional, folk, ethnic, informal, anonymous architecture, etc., are the synonyms that you may club with being vernacular or what is vernacular. Now, we've all seen this images. Those of you who are interested in vernacular and traditional architecture would be aware of the Red Village in Iran, or so many other settlements that exist that you cannot differentiate from the soil that comes from, the material that comes from that area in which the architecture is constructed or the buildings are built. One of the most famous of examples, Mexico, or if you go and see the settlements in Greece or Santorini or across the world that you will see in Africa or India or anywhere else, you will find that the distinguishing character of a settlement, which is vernacular, is the material that is used, and the construction technique that material results into is very vitally critical for the development of architecture, vernacular architecture. If you see these images, someone might say these are very carefully selected images, but these are nevertheless our history and reality. And if you see the landscape behind, if you see the context behind and the built mass in front, it's very difficult to distinguish, as if there's a settlement there or as if there's an imposement of a built mass which is foreign to the context where this is coming up. I'm just trying to give you an example and to make you, conducive to understanding what is being said by these images. African villages or settlement in Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, or some of the regions where there's strong presence of materials and a built form and a necessity, Turkey, for example, or a desert settlement or a tropical climate, and so on and on. Now, where is vernacular? Where all do you find vernacular? I think it's all over the world, across. Wherever there was a settlement, there was vernacular architecture, and vernacular architecture gave character to a community. Now, this is very, very relevant to understand at this stage, is that architecture always gave character to a community and were responsible for the growth of civilizations. Now, this vernacular follows a hierarchy in its growth, region, etc. For example, countries, states, regions, communities, and subcommunities. And subcommunity is the micro module of vernacular. Now, what does this mean? How do we explain? I'm sure we all are learned people. We are all faculty. We are all researchers, and you know we know how to process information into knowledge and convert it into wisdom. And I'm sure you all have known this, that micro module of vernacular is a sub-community. Now, what do we mean by community and what do we mean by sub-community? For example, if we see today's context, India as a country, and then you have states, then you have regions, east, west, north, south, central. Then we have communities. In, let's say, if we take Madhya Pradesh, or if we take Maharashtra, for example, in Maharashtra also there are 5 or 6 regions, Vidarbha, Marathwada, Khandesh, and so on and on. There are so many other smaller regions. Even in Vidarbha, if you see, or even if you see Marathwada, or any region that you will see, any state and any region that you will see, there will be subtle variations of vernacular character from region to region, community to community, state to state, country to country, and so on and on. So the smallest module of being vernacular is the sub-community. Now, what do we mean by sub-community and what do we mean by community? For example, like I was giving the example of Vidarbha. Vidarbha is a large region in Maharashtra, and it constitutes about 5 or 6 districts. Now, when you see this, Nagpur is one, Bhandara is one, Chandrapur is there, and so what happens is the character, the architectural character varies when you travel from Nagpur in the north or the east to Bhandara, or to Chandrapur in the south, or to Gadchiroli tribal region in the southeast. So the character keeps changing, although this character is within a larger framework, which is Vidarbha. So this is what is to be understood, and I will try explaining this a little. But when you come from outside and you see, then you can broadly say that the architectural character was Vidarbhite. It was Vidarbha oriented, or it was Marathwada. The character changes in Khandesh, and so on and on. And then when you go outside Maharashtra, then you say, no, we now entered Madhya Pradesh, and the character is changing gradually. So this understanding of the hierarchy of the vernacular growth is critical in understanding the vernacular character, and understanding the reason to study vernacular architecture and traditional wisdom, to be incorporated in architecture of today, to be incorporated in the pedagogical methods and the ways that we're teaching architecture to our future architects. Now, why do you need to do this? Why do you need to learn vernacular? Or what is the reason for understanding what has happened in the past and what is now going to happen in the future? But I think it is a cross section, because vernacular architecture is a cross section of its people, their culture and lifestyle. So when we understand architectural development across centuries, we understand the real essence of people, the culture and the lifestyle that these ancestors of ours lived. And it's a direct representation of any society. It has strong cross-community influences. Building forms have a direct relationship with climate, context, people and their lifestyles. And study of vernacular helps in understanding of our own selves. And unless we discover our own selves, our own heritage and our own inheritance, we will not be able to make a future which is brighter, which is better, and for not only for ourselves in the present, but for a future of the people that are going to come in. And architecture spans across generations. Whatever we build today is being built for posterity, we assume, and it will not only be used by the present generation, but by the generations that will come. So understanding of our own selves, our own communities, our own lifestyles, our own people, our own context, our climate, culture is very vitally important. And that can be learned through, vernacular architectural development. Although there may be variations in the build form from villages to villages, community to community, the difference, like I explained, is very subtle, and the construction techniques and the structural system are subtly the same, because the materials that were available and the knowledge that you have had of the construction techniques and spanning, a distance was almost same in region to region and community to community. And the logical growth and development pattern is always based on simple logistics. Now, if you see the development, or if you know the development that happened earlier, transportation was a problem. So the material that was locally available was contextually available. If it was stone, it was fine. If it was mud, it was fine. If it was bamboo, timber, or whatever was available, was used and was improvised upon to, span a particular system and evolve a structural system. And it was a very logical growth that happened on the availability of the material, the building material, construction material. So construction techniques are always a direct, have a direct relationship with the availability of materials and the kind of materials that were available, and the compressive strength and the tensile strength of the material that was available. And there have been many strong influences on the growth pattern of the settlements, vernacular cities, vernacular architecture. They've been always strong influences. And now these strong influences, what are these strong influences? We'll come to that. And in spite of that, growth pattern within a community and neighboring communities is similar, because it was, if you imagine, say, thousands of years ago, 1,000 years ago, let's say even 1,000 in the Mohenjo-daro, Harappa times, river valley civilizations, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, or the time of the Greeks or the Romans or the Gupta period or Ashokas, in our country, or the coming in of the Mughals, we'll find transportation was still a problem. Although the transportation was horse-based or some animal-based, wheel was invented. So the terrain was not known, the geography was not known, the location was not known very clearly. So the knowledge, the development of construction techniques, development of architectural form was restricted to smaller communities and smaller regions. But what have been the influences on vernacular architecture? We'll come to it. One of the most celebrated examples, where you have 10-story, 8-story high vernacular building in Wadi Hadramaut with a mosque in between, and Jordan, and so on and on. So what have been the influences on this vernacular architecture? So the contextual and the time frame is at the background that remains constant, and the most strong influence on vernacular is the climate, the materials, and the culture. Now, climate plays a very important and a major role in the development of vernacular architecture of any region. This is a very standard assumption which we all take it for granted. If there's heavy monsoon, then you have sloping roofs. If there's no monsoon, you have flat roofs. And if you have snow, then you have heavier roofs, and so on and on. And then microclimate changes the build form, hence the variation in types of buildings that we see around the world. The rain, wind, heat, cold, geographical placements like seacoast, desert, etc., play a major role in development of build form. This is a standard acceptable fact by all of us, that we do understand the influences of climate on architectural development in the history, in the past, and the present, and in the future. And the other thing which influences is the culture of people. Now, this is very critical to understand the development of vernacular architecture across the world. Like, lifestyle of people affect the build form. Culture, tradition, and societal behavior affects the build form. How food is prepared and eaten makes a difference on the build mass. And how festivals or marriages or social functions are celebrated affects the organization of build form, and so on and on. Similarly, cultural influences are intangible in nature, and there is a constant to and fro in the exchange that happens. If you recall the river valley civilizations, we all understand that there were 5 river valley civilizations in the country, in the world. The Indus Valley, the Nile Valley, the Amazon, the Euphrates and Tigris, and the Yellow River in China, and so on and on. The development that happens, the settlements that happened along the river valleys were almost similar in its growth pattern. Because there was water, because there was river, and because there was transportation available through the river, and the soil that was available, which was very fertile near the rivers, that's how settlement happened. And there may be so many other reasons, but that's how these settlements happened. Now, the fundamental question that arises in our minds is as to why did the architectural character of the Indus Valley differ from the Nile or the Egyptian civilization? Or why did Egyptian civilization differ from that of the Mesopotamian civilization or the Yellow River in China? Why was the architectural character different? It was basically because of the simple reason, because of the people, because of the culture of the people, because of the uh, because of the way people made their food, the way people made their living, the way people made their social functions, and the way all this was conducted changed the architectural character of the development that happened in these river valley civilizations. The availability of materials almost was similar along the river banks. I mean, in stone was available in abundance in Greece, in Egypt, but a little away from the river Nile. But the soil, the alluvial soil was available. Why did the architectural character be not same across all the river valley civilizations? It was because of the people, the culture, the traditions, their way of eating, the way of living, the way of earning their livelihood, and so on and on. And that is very crucial in the understanding of what are the influences and what is the growth pattern of vernacular in a particular region, in a particular community. Now, climate, I have there's some issue with this. Just a moment. And then the materials. I was just talking of materials. The locally available building materials have always determined the character of vernacular architecture. Available materials have led to a definite construction techniques and structural innovation. We just discussed this. This quest of structural innovation coupled with construction technique leads to development of architectural vernacular character. Materials coupled with climatic factors have been solely responsible for vernacular character of a region. And why do we need to now study vernacular architecture in a contemporary modern time, and what is its relevance? Now, in any design, I'll now deviate a little. We've talked enough of what vernacular is and what are the influences, the context, and the history. I would now discuss very briefly what is the design process. Why are we doing all this? I mean, there has to be a thought process, and we have just discussed the thought process. If that is based on vernacular and traditional wisdom, then what is the method and what is the output? Because these are three critical steps in understanding the process. You may have a very nice thought, you may love vernacular, you may love traditional, you may love your heritage, you may love modern architecture, you may love glass buildings, you may love high-tech buildings, and you may like that philosophy also, you may like the thought process also, but if you don't know the method of converting your thoughts into an output, which is architectural product or a settlement or urban design or landscape design or XYZ, then you are nowhere, because unless you are able to convert that method, convert that thought process through a method, it is impossible to give an output which is based on your thought processes, which is based on your philosophy. Now, what is the thought behind all that? Very quickly, I will go through this, that man always shared a symbiotic relationship with nature, which we just discussed. And this relationship resulted in a contextual framework of the land that he belonged to. And his architecture was also always rooted to its land. Architecture was and is essentially contextual. And it is rooted not only to the ground upon which it sits, but also is an extension of us, its people, their culture, and the milieu. I am summarizing whatever we just discussed, and every architectural creation is always a step in the onward evolution of the land to which it belongs. You can correlate the images with what is written in the images. With over 3,000 years of recorded history, Indian vernacular traditions grew and evolved to form a strong and cohesive architecture. Now I'm talking of particularly specific India and the region, because we are sitting here and I'm trying to give you examples of how this development. Now, as societies became complex and the communities became, the structure of communities and social living became complex and complicated, the essence of vernacular was slowly and gradually being converted into a larger framework and into a larger network of built environment. And this evolution grew richer with assimilation and inputs from various cultures coming into the subcontinent, including the British. I mean, if you see, when Mughals came in, they brought in their character, their people, their rituals, their religion, and then they fused with the existing Indian religion and Indian craftsmanship and materials and so on and on. Similarly, when the British came in, newer functions came in, and newer technology, newer inputs came in, but the architecture and the chain that I'm talking of, the chain of evolution, which started from a primitive man when he lived in caves, and then he came out and started making huts and so on, and then became a social animal, and the entire society and the societal framework became complex and complicated. The it it went on becoming complicated and complex until we started living in organized political divided boundaries and so on. But the chain of evolution always existed. That chain of evolution was based on the step that you had taken a while earlier. Now this vernacular process of growth and evolution continued in spite of changed and newer functional needs and expression, and this was interrupted with the advent of industrial revolution and the resultant globalization that came in, and along with the coming in of modern architecture in India. Because the fundamental premise of this chain of evolution of vernacular growth that I am talking of is based on the premise that vernacular is never imported. Vernacular is always local, locally grown, and locally developed. And that was broken with the coming in of modern architecture in India and the industrialization that happened and the resultant globalization that happened. And if you see and observe that wherever industrialization and development has penetrated, these impersonal forms have intruded upon the traditional profiles of cities, towns, and villages. And the predictability and monotony of today's modern architecture is astonishing. There is no vernacular character or any essence of vernacular left in the development that we are doing today. And we need to see that importing something or using something which is non-contextual is prestige, and that is neither here nor there because it belongs to nowhere. And the chain of evolution that I am talking of the vernacular growth pattern has been broken. Now, it is evidently clear that something has gone amiss with our architecture today, and the nucleus has been forgotten, which is the man and its context. The context has gone out of architecture. And when we say context has gone out of architecture, the vernacular essence has gone out of architecture. And architecture had become iconic, egoistic, and too creator-oriented, too commercial, because it is no longer a collective effort to develop a character, to develop a community. It has become person-oriented. And all vernacular architecture, if you see, was ingrained in freedom. And that freedom came with a sense of responsibility. Now, if you see, traditionally, creativity was always linked with common sense. And all vernacular architecture relied on logic and purpose. Today, there is no purpose in our architecture, and there is no logic in our architecture. And if you go to Fatehpur Sikri and you see the Salim Chishti's tomb, or even if you go to Taj Mahal and see the intricate stone jalis that have been made, you will understand that they are all fitting into a common framework. But each jali is different. That was the freedom that was given. And that freedom came with a sense of responsibility of a larger framework. And that is another essence of vernacular architecture, which we have forgotten in today's architecture. And because vernacular architecture respected growth in conjunction with continuity and exhibited creative and aesthetical details, which are often solutions to a problem. These days, we are creating problems than solutions because we have been detached with our roots and what our history was, what our inheritance is. And architecture, to me, should be a response to this and the realization of the importance and the appropriateness of the traditions of architecture that have gone by. And this is why you need to study vernacular architecture. And this is precisely the reason to understand our history, tradition, and study our vernacular architecture so that we are able to contextualize and subsequently humanize our architecture. And this humanizing of architecture is absolutely missing because that humanization of architecture or contextualization of architecture is gone out of architecture today, of our built mass today. The quality of life of our fellow citizens is suffering. To achieve a contextually sensitive architecture, it is imperative that a deep understanding and study of the vernacular be done. And this is precisely the relevance of vernacular learning in learning to be an architect. Now, how shall this be done? I talked of earlier the design process. So there has to be a method, and understanding a concept is very important, but implementing that understanding and converting into build form is more important. To do that, we need a method. And what is the method is what I'm trying to tell you. Moses gave his people 10 commandments. I gave myself 10 commandments. I said, these are the 10 commandments after my deep study and understanding, whatever little understanding I have had with my uh, explorations in vernacular architecture and tradition. I realized that there have to be 10 points. And if I stick to them, if these are my commandments, this is my Bible, this is my Gita, this is my Quran, this is my Granth Sahib, I will not go wrong in my thought process and converting that thought process into build form. First is respect for local people and their economy, respect for local climate, culture, and context, respect for man and nature, non-industrial building methods as far as possible, as much as possible, and reinventing and reintroduction of traditional building construction techniques. Six is the continuum of tradition, which we need to follow the chain of evolution that I was talking of. Imaginative use of traditional building techniques, spaces, and volumes. You cannot copy what was built thousands of years ago. You need to be imaginative and more creative in evolving something which is more suitable in the time frame that I was talking of. All this happens within a time frame. And if you see, even in a vernacular settlement, you will find that as the time frame changes, the character also changes, although the chain of evolution is respected. So whatever happens revolves around that chain that I'm talking of. So that evolution has to happen. You cannot be stagnant and say, I'll build the same way like my forefathers were building hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And the most important principle of vernacular is the recycle and the reuse that happens. Innovation in finishes. You cannot, finish a building in the same way that it was being built earlier. And use of materials, natural materials, and an ecological approach towards them. So these are my 10 commandments, which I use in my projects and which I have tested over a period of time and realized that they have not failed me. They have not failed the thought process that I have in understanding what vernacular was and what vernacular is, what our traditional history, what our traditional built mass was and how it was built, what was the construction techniques that were used, what was the method of spanning a particular distance with the materials that were locally available to you, and so on and on. So now I will show you a few examples very quickly, and I'll open the floor for, I'm having a little problem, so I will try to cut short the projects, but I will explain wherever it is critical, and then we can have interaction and question and answers. I will just very briefly explain. This is Priyadarshini Institute of Architecture and Design Studies, which is based on the fundamental principle of understanding how the built mass was built earlier, when it is heavy at the bottom and it goes lighter and lighter on the top. It uses extensive climatic features and extensive elements which are conducive to the climate that it is being built in. It uses extensive steel, which can be recycled and reused, and a mix of load-bearing and non-load-bearing structure wherever it is necessary. Appropriate structural system has been followed, and so on and on. Now, if you see, if I give you an example of, let's say this photograph, if you see the steel posts are not going down into the wall, but they're being grouted on the slab that exists on the floor that exists there, and the parapet wall stops before the steel post. Now, why this has been done, if you see when we studied traditional architecture in Maharashtra and Vidarbha, we realized that the wooden joist, if it went into a adobe wall or a mud wall over a period of time, it decayed because of the moisture and because of other issues. So what these people learned over the years was not to keep the structural system free of the wall, or the joist did not go, the wooden joist did not go into the wall, so it doesn't absorb the moisture, it doesn't decay over a period of time, or is not eaten by termites. So steel also does the same thing. If it goes into concrete or into a brick wall over a period of time, either it will crack open because it rusts and oxidizes over a period of time. So we have understood the wisdom. We did not reinvent the wheel, and we understood the wisdom, and then how detailing was done. The outer facade, where it faces west, and extreme heat in Nagpur, 48, 50 degrees Celsius temperature in Nagpur. So there are no openings. It's a dead wall which cuts off the glare and the heat, and the ventilation is taken through courtyards. Indirect ventilation and lighting is taken through courtyards as the entrance porch, central courtyard around which the activities of the studios and the classrooms are clubbed together. And the right hand side you will see the various kind of detailings that exist in bamboo construction, or where wood was used and a longer span was to be supported. So you had support at 45-degree or 30-degree angles depending on the span that you were doing it. Now this is another campus that we got the Interbau Award, International Network for Traditional Built Architecture in Urban Environment, or something. It's an organization floated by Prince Charles in the UK. It has presence all over the country, and they support and promotes traditional architecture and built environment across the world. And this is an example of very fine analysis of what exists in and around where it is built, which is in Nagpur. Local sandstone has been used, local bricks have been used. If you see this also, the floors project out a little so that running water does not spoil the materials. The ground floor is built with stone masonry, actual stone masonry, which is load bearing. Over that, you will see brickwork, somewhere it is plastered, somewhere it is left exposed. And on top, the second floor, you will see there's no brickwork. It's all windows, and all the windows, all doors, everything as much as possible has been recycled and reused in this project, including stone and bricks, and the tiles, the mangrove tiles and everything also have been recycled and reused in this project. This project respects a lot of principles, the 10 commandments that I was talking of. This is not going ahead. Right. So if you see, again, this is a west-facing wall. So you have a lot of baffle walls to cut out the glare and the heat, the exposed brickwork, projecting roofs, and so on. And the tiles that have been used, the terracotta tiles that have been used, are also recycled from a large textile factory which was demolished. The entire windows, doors, except of course sanitary fixtures, taps, and some essential upholstery and tapestry is new. Otherwise, everything else in the building is reused and recycled. Sorry, this is going back. Yeah. One of the other views, it has been developed as if a old town is organically developing, where each house has its own character, yet it fits into a larger framework. What I talked of, vernacular architecture, giving freedom to each individual artisan, but yet falling into a framework of larger goal that the vernacular wants to achieve. This is also a part of the campus wherein north light is on the left hand side, and the buildings are lower, and the building gets higher and higher to take the north light inside, because activities which need natural light have been clubbed on top so that you are not deprived of natural lighting. Some of the other views of the same campus. Corridors. Now, if you see, this is what the entire campus, which is about maybe 5 lakh square feet or built up area, does not have an RCC slab, or we have avoided RCC as much as possible, concrete as much as possible, because I feel personally that concrete is criminal to be used in a built mass. It absorbs heat and keeps radiating heat back into the atmosphere, either inside or outside, 8 hours after the sun has gone down. And that's why we have uncomfortable environs to use and to sit in if there is extensive use of concrete. So the slab, so-called slab, are the girders, the metal girders that we have used, and there's local stone on top, which is a very hard stone, and over that you do put screed and do the flooring. So that's the structural spanning system that we have done. And if it's a top floor, if it's a porch, then it's of course a sloping roof with terracotta tiles, which are also recycled. And if you will see, the entire complex is developed on the premise that we will try to not impose and keep the building as building diameter. I don't know if how to explain that concept. I'm sorry, I'm not very clear in that. But if we are able to source materials, if you're able to source labor, and if you source everything else that goes into a building within a very restricted diameter, you know, the building would be more vernacular, will be more contextual, will be more authentic to the place you're building in. For example, if I am using, let's say, brick, if I'm using stone, if I'm using cement, if I'm using XYZ lime or whatever material I'm using, if it is sourced within, let's say, 200 kilometers of, diameter of the, if my building, if my project is the center point, and if I am within 200 kilometers, if I'm able to source all materials, I will be able to make a building which is very, very contextual and which is very vernacular to the region that I'm building in. It's a very difficult task to do these days, but I have been able to achieve a radius of 200 kilometers at the moment. So that means my diameter at the moment in this is 400 kilometers. If I'm able to do that, my aim and my purpose now is to build something which is 50 kilometers, which I know it's almost impossible to achieve, probably not in my lifetime, but I'm making an effort to reduce the diameter in which I am sourcing everything that goes into my building. The columns that you see are all recycled, reused from demolished buildings. And these granite columns, if you see these round columns, these stone columns, which are recycled and reused, and arches and everything, and the windows that you see, everything, including the flooring, has been recycled and reused to a great extent. I don't have a. If you see the floor in the middle picture, where you see this hanging lamps, the floor below it that you see is also recycled floor, in the sense the slate tiles which were available, which were removed from a demolished building. It has been cut into smaller pieces of 3 inches by 3 inches or 6 inches by 6 inches and laid into a pattern. So you try to make effort as much as possible to do that. This is another project where belongs to one of the richest men in the country, but this is a forest house for them. It's built by tribals of the region, including the artwork that has gone into it, including the contractors, including the build. Everything were from the tribals of the region. The tiles that we have used are also manufactured where fortunately it was there where it was being built. Cement tiles, recycled furniture. The furniture is recycled, and hand plastered and so on and on. Now this is a resort, very high-end resort that we have built, and I'll tell you an interesting story of what I was talking of vernacular architecture and the connotations that a community has. The Mangal Sutra example that I had given earlier. Now this is a resort for Taj Resorts, and you will find that the resort was built in a very, very organically grown pattern. Not a single bamboo clump was cut, and the layout site plan was altered to accommodate the existing bamboo clumps, the bamboo forest that it sits in. It is made of local mud and local material that is available. The country tiles that you will see on top of the as a roof is also locally sourced from the villages that existed around. I was talking of the iconography and the importance of the local understanding that only locals have. If you see the motif around the door, the wooden motif around the door, the wooden door and the motif around it, which is made in mud, signifies a certain thing, which is architecture being used as a non-verbal communication in a society, which is so vernacular. Essence is so vernacular. We like this kind of motif that went around the doors and windows, and we asked the contractor to do this, and the ladies who were actually doing the plasters and things like that, which belong to the local community, were very reluctant to do it, because then we realized, and they were laughing and giggling, and then we realized on further inquiry that this particular motif signified that there was a marriageable girl in the house. And if there were 2 lines, there were 2 girls in the house, and so on and on. So this was a wonderful example of architecture being used vernacularly to as a non-verbal communication to the society and the community at large, that without the owner saying that there's a marriageable girl in the house, the motifs and the symbolism is used through architecture to convey a certain element which has to be conveyed to society. So this is so vernacular. This is so essentially the essence of vernacular architecture. Opens it out. There's another Taj resort that has been done with a lounge, sitting lounge with only a roof and no walls. You sit in the open nature and so on. That's the paradox that we all live in, wherein I was talking of we have lost the connect, and the chain of evolution that I talked of was also broken as far as the lifestyles of people are concerned, wherein you have lost the essence of living. We have lost the essence of living, wherein we keep we keep rushing after earning money, having luxurious lifestyles, and success and whatever XYZ. And then we spend the same money that we have earned to de-stress ourselves by going into places like this, by spending a phenomenal amount of money. This costs something like 50 to 60,000 a night for a couple. And so that's the paradox that we all are living in these days. So that chain of evolution is also broken as far as our lives are concerned, as far as our goals are concerned, and as far as the essence that existed in vernacular societies is concerned, which has been broken these days in today's hectic lifestyle that we all live in. Another resort wherein contemporary structural knowledge has been used to support a 4,000 square feet roof on the left-hand side that you will see. It's a space frame, and it's 4,000 square feet on 8 columns on the periphery and no columns in between. Reception table in an island of pool of water, right? Recycled, refurbished window that goes into the resort. Another house that we have built for a saint, and with local sandstone columns and so on and on. Extensive use of steel. Steel to me is a very versatile material, although it needs industrialized production. It may be having a lot of carbon footprint, but if you see in the longer run, it is totally recyclable, reusable, and so on and on. The amount of the campus that I was showing, the amount of steel that has gone into it has actually paid back for the construction cost of the entire campus that I was talking of. These are some snapshots of some projects that we've done. Use of natural light, bringing in natural light as much as possible, so you don't depend on artificial lighting and ventilation and so on and on. This is a project where you evolve now over a period of time, understanding the changing needs of the people that you're building for. Farmhouse with local stone, local roofs, solar roofs, solar powered roofs, and so on and on. I'll just quickly go through. This is a house which is just being built at the moment. This is a traditional house being built on a Maharashtrian Wada pattern. There's a house being built in Delhi with again of steel and terracotta tiles. Look, you can imagine the details. I don't have time to explain, each and every detail in relation to vernacular or traditional wisdom that we have learned, but some other time probably. Another house in a gated community, another house in a community. The clubhouse that we're doing in Nagpur, wherein we are developing a terracotta Mangalore tile with inbuilt solar panels, which will be able to generate the solar power without having a solar panel on top. The experiment is in its initial stages. As the connection from those tiles, which are very small in size, is becoming humongous. So we're trying to work on that, how it can be worked. But if that happens, it will be another revolution wherein you can use local material, vernacular material, and improvise on it. And that also is becoming a solar panel for you. This is a lakefront development where we have transparency across the planning has been done in such a way that the transparency to the lake is across the project, all the built masses. So you have large hovering roofs, which are low-lying roofs, so you don't need much walls. And then whatever is there as walls is a jali, so that you can see across the built mass, the swimming pool, and the other views. The columns that you're seeing are again recycled columns, which existed on the site where there was a building, a colonial building, which was demolished, and nearby on the same site. And we're using those columns which existed there into our project. The first floor. The other museum that we're doing, which is on a sloping site, this is the Gandhi Smarak Sangrahalaya, and it goes down, being very humble in its existence. So when you walk in, you just see these brick walls and solar panels and nothing else. The museum goes down into the ground as you progress, as you walk into the museum. There's a lower floor, and you arrive at the upper level. This is a terracotta research center, terracotta and ceramic research center that we're doing in Maharashtra. Existing chimneys, those two gray chimneys exist there on site, which are icons, visual icons of the community. So we've tried to retain them and group the buildings around them so that they become a landmark, architectural landmark. This is being done in the very fertile alluvial soil that is available there where it is being built. And this is all adobe construction, load-bearing construction. That's why you have these parabolic arches where you don't need lintels to span. And the parabolic arches are strong enough, made in adobe, to rammed earth or made with sun-dried bricks to take the load. So you avoid the detailing of a foreign material coming into mud construction, residential quarters. Now, this is very interesting learning that we've had. I'll just try to finish in 5 minutes. These are amenities being built across the highways. Now, highways is a symbol of development of a country, of a city, of a region, and they crisscross from culture to culture. I mean, from Srinagar to Jamnagar, from Srinagar to Kanyakumari, and so on and on. They cross. They are, if you're driving down on a highway, of a national highway, you will find the character of the land changing, the character of people changing, architecture changing, the context changing, materials, climate, everything changing. So it's a fantastic experience, learning experience if you drive down the highways. We have been fortunate enough to do projects like this, which are in its initial stages. So if the highway is in crossing Jaipur and that region, then you use the materials and the detailing of that particular region, visual, iconic landmarks, architectural landmarks, the materials and the structural and spanning techniques that existed there in that region, and use it in a contemporary functional needs that exist today. So this has a food court, a trauma center, offices, petrol offices, you have motels, and you have dhabas, you have fuel stations, and so on and on. And then when it goes further into Rajasthan, into Jodhpur and Jaisalmer, so the character changes, the detailing changes. And this is a project that we're doing in Srinagar on the highway. The highway starts from Srinagar and goes to Jammu and then further down to Amritsar and so on. So this is a convention center along with a wayside amenities center. So on the left-hand side, you have wayside amenities where you have food courts and motels and everything. And the right-hand side is the convention center and the conference rooms and a resort, which ends up with beautiful surroundings in the valley. This is in a valley. So that's the valley, and this is how we have designed. I will not go into details, but the character has changed now when it is in Kashmir. The character has changed. The roofs have come in, the sloping roofs have come in. It borrows heavily from the roofs that exist around the site because of the snow that comes in, and so on and on. This is just a small example. This is in Srinagar. This project is in Srinagar, wherein the houseboats that are lined there and the roofs that exist in the settlement, traditional settlement in Srinagar. So the derivation of that roof and the derivation of that roof into our project, wherein you have a banquet hall, a 5-star hotel, you have a shopping mall, and you have food courts, and you have filling stations, you have parking, you have amenities, toilets, and so on, relaxing spaces while you're driving the highway. So, and then the iconography of the most famous mosque in Srinagar and the stone by which it is built is being borrowed here. This is how it looks in when it will snow. This is how the structural system is. If you've seen in Srinagar, the bridges, the timber bridges, they don't have straight support system. They have crisscross support systems because the wood that is available, the cross section of the wood that is available is very small, sometimes not even 6 inches. So you cannot have a straight single support for a bridge. So you have multiple supports of 2 inches diameter, 3 inches diameter, and so on. So it's a heavy crisscross like this of the structural system. So we have borrowed the same system and tried to use smaller sections for a larger spans, but having this crisscross systems to mitigate the stresses that are coming in from the roof that roof that is spanning. Now, when the highway goes to Uttarakhand or upper Himalayan regions, the character changes, the cart-cone construction of wood and the stone being bounded by a wooden frame, and the detailing also changes when it goes there. When it travels down to the south to Kanyakumari, when it goes to the western coastal region, the character changes, and so on. I'm not showing all the examples across the country. I'm showing few examples how to adopt your design to context, to the vernacular idioms of a certain place and the character of a certain place. While the function remains same, the character changes, the material changes, and so on and on. The louvers come in, the glass goes out because of the the glass was an essential necessity when it was in Rajasthan because of the sandstorms that come in. But out here you need circulation of air, so the glass goes out and louver panels come in. This is another example of solar roofed, transparent solar roof on the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway. I'll just skip this. This is something that we're doing for Jyotirling temple development in Maharashtra. The black basalt stone is being used. This is another project that we're doing in Maharashtra, temple premises, rejuvenation, integrated tourism development of a temple premise, wherein the roof structure and the roof forms are borrowed heavily from the Vidarbha region where this temple exists. These are the Bhakt Niwas and the shopping complex around it. Now, this is a newer function which has come in, exhibition, large exhibition spaces. These are 3 halls of about 1 acre of built-up space for a agricultural exhibition that happens here, and the experimental fields of horticulture goes on top of the roof, which is a structural system like this. And the eternal truth that remains ultimately in the end is that I'm giving you an example of my architecture, but it holds valid for all true vernacular architecture that is based on the fundamental philosophy that in the eternal journey of my soul, I am a visitor on this earth and I have inherited, apart from many things, architecture. And that when I leave this earth, nothing of me will remain. My body will merge with nature. My architecture, whenever it dies, shall do so too. To me, is real sustainability, absolute truth, and the foundation of true vernacular architecture. And this is the concept of cradle to cradle. The building materials that you're using, if you see the traditional wisdom and the vernacular architecture that existed, that was built earlier, you will find that every material that was used merges down into the earth whenever that building dies. And if we are able to do that in today's context, that is the true vernacular architecture that you will ever produce in your lifetime, and which will be a gift to not only protect the environment, not only be extremely sustainable, but will also be kind to the Mother Earth that we all are living in. Thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Habeeb sir. It was very nice to see an architect who is into practicing vernacular architecture and explaining the concept that has driven him through his life. In fact, I wanted to ask you, at what stage of your career would you have ventured into practicing vernacular? Because explaining this concept to the client and with the deviations from original detail to what gets executed on site, it becomes very difficult to monitor. So there's a small question on this.
This, Anand, is a standard question. In fact, after these questions started coming in, after I do a presentation like this kind of presentation, right. I have made another presentation with some other time probably, or I'll discuss with you personally sometime. The journey of my life, of my architectural journey of my life, in which I talk of 3 phases: first, second, third, and then the current phase. So basically, see, I was always, I'll just take another 2 minutes to explain your question. I was always influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright when I was in the US. And I made it a point to see all the projects that he had done that was built. Unfortunately, I was in an area which was near Oak Park, Chicago, where all these major creations were, including Roby House and all. So I was very influenced with with Frank Lloyd Wright at that time, and of course Charles Correa. And I had the fortune of interacting with Hassan Fatiji for a little while, and Mies van der Rohe. I went specifically to study something in Illinois Institute of Technology, the Crown Hall that he had made. So I was influenced by the detailing of Mies, the concept of Wright, and the being basic and humble of Hassan Fatih, and being climate and contextually friendly, Charles Correa, and so on. So these were my basic initial influences. But when I started, I was working in the US in an office which was doing exceptionally only interior projects. So I was trained in doing interior projects. So when I came back and established my office in Nagpur, in India, I concentrated on doing only interiors, because interiors gives you a platform to experiment your design, which is quite immature at that time, in design ideas and design thoughts, which is quite immature. So interiors give you a faster turnover also financially, and maturity wise also, what is right, what is wrong, how detailing is to be done. And then it gives you a branding also. So I started, for the initial 5 years, I only did interiors, and then I diversified into architecture. And I realized that the kind of work that I was doing initially was not what my thought process or what my liking was or what my inspirations were. So then gradually, and ultimately I shifted. I remember one thing which Hassan Fatih had said, that to have this thought propagated in society, you need to go from the top, not from the bottom. If you will keep working for the bottom, I mean, bottom means the lower middle class, or poorer or economically weaker sections, this will not work. It has to go from, you need Amitabh Bachchan to tell and sit in the resorts that I had designed to save tiger, and you generate online about 40 crores in a day, when these NGOs are working for years and years and could not even collect a crore, for that. And you need a Shah Rukh Khan to tell us which soap to use, to shower, or to bath, or to, so you need that kind of a anchoring to tell us what it is done. So start from the top. So what we did was, we did a project, and fortunately the client was absolutely okay with what we had shown him, initially, and that house was built. And then one of his relatives was making engineering college, which I had just shown you the Interbau award thing. And then he said, so my work is starting, the drawings have been done, the foundation is going to be laid next week, but I'm not liking what is being done. I want a campus like the house that you have done there. So it was my initial client who agreed to what I wanted. That house, which I have not shown today, is also entirely recycled and reused materials. So I got this opportunity, and then we started doing it, and the entire campus was built. And after that was it was very easy. After that, campus was built and it was appreciated, and then it was very easy to convince clients. You had to just take them there, show what it was done, and then things. But it is very difficult. It's very difficult. It's not very easy. And to be honest, not all our projects are like this. We try to use, out of the 10 commandments that I've said, even if I use 1 or 2 commandments, my purpose is solved and the client is happy. But
Yes.
it's very difficult. It's not easy.
It's very difficult, sir.
It's very difficult,
sir. Yeah.
No, the problem is not that. The problem is financial. What happens is, you don't get paid extra for this. And the kind of efforts that you need to take to make a building like this is phenomenal. If you're using recycled materials, you have to spend time to find out, you for this opening size that you have designed, you need 10 windows, and you have to stand on the site and find out which 10 windows will be, fitted here, or which door is going to go here, and your drawings go for a toss. Your working drawings go for a toss because the height of the door or the width of the door doesn't match your drawings. So, it's a very intensive, site-intensive process, and you don't get paid for it. So you don't earn as much as you would have earned in a project, doing a typical project than doing a project like this.
Yes, sir. In fact, it engages an architect as if as a craft, so it's a shift from architecture to craft. And there is also a lot of hesitation in the minds of architects from using recycled material, like the use of recycled bricks and bonding, and the recycled Mangalore tiles as you had used. So there's a lot of hesitation in the minds of people in using recycled material, So convincing them down the way could be very difficult.
Yeah, it is kind of very difficult. And I'll give you an example here. I mean, this like we are supposed to, we're already late. The client had approached me in this project. I'm giving an example of this campus that we've done in September. And he was going to, the ASCT inspection was to happen in March. So he had about seven months to do and about 1 lakh square feet area to be built. And I said, there is no other way that this could be done. We cannot have an RCC slab. I didn't want to have RCC slab. So I said, this is not possible to be done because no contractor will have about 30,000 square feet of centering to recycle, in 3 months to make 3 slabs and then finish the building. And by putting a girder and a stone, you can start finishing a building. That's the only way we can finish 1 lakh square feet. And then the tiles, 1 lakh square feet tile would mean something like 1.5 lakh square feet of roofing on top. And to make manually, these tiles are made manually. It was not possible to make 1.5 lakh, or 2 lakhs of tiles in 3 months' time. So we said we have to use recycled tiles. There's no other way. There's no other option. So sometimes you need to, be a little smart and then try to, circumvent and try to convince. But some clients do have reservations of using recycled furniture, especially for the bedrooms. But for public areas, I have not faced any objection as such.
I invite questions from the house.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for very informative presentation. And we do have a lot of questions from our participants. I would like to just ask you from them. Kavita Kamath is writing, can we make Griha IGPC part of mandatory building permissions which emphasize on vernacular architecture?
No, I think it's nothing to do with vernacular architecture. Griha and IGBC and other ratings that exist, the GEM rating or something, these exist on architecture that is already being produced to make it a little more vernacular, to make it a little more sustainable, to make it more green, so-called, and so on and on. So, there's no... See, I would ask all of you to see an interview of Nasiruddin Shah. I hope you know that actor.
Yes, sir.
On
Yes.
YouTube. Nasiruddin Shah in art films, alternate films. He is explained very beautifully, and that is applicable to our terminology as well. I mean, if you talk of vernacular architecture, sustainable, green, alternate, traditional, heritage, these are all terms, and these are not watertight terms. These are not watertight terms. I mean, see, these are all, interflowing terms. There is no thing and there is no term or which defines what is sustainable or what is vernacular. So that's the essence of vernacular. So anything, any methodology like the IGBC or the Graha or the GEM to rate a building, to promote a certain thought process is always welcome. So why make it mandatory for vernacular? Because there is no vernacular architecture as such per se. I mean, if you see my architecture if you see the campus or if you see those buildings, you will not say that this is vernacular, because vernacular as an idiom, as a term is fixed in our minds, that it has to be made with mud, it has to have a very low lying, it has to have thatch roof on top, it has to have Bangalore tiles or something, and that is what vernacular architecture is. That's a idea which is imagery which is fixed into our mind. But that is wrong. Vernacular cannot be idolized, cannot be iconized, cannot be made into an imagery or something like that. It's a thought process. It's your soul inside you cannot have a mapping of your soul, can you? So that vernacular thought process is the soul of architecture. So it cannot be made into an image or into a. So our image, unfortunately, when we talk of vernacular, is, I'm sure someone will ask, how can this thought process be applied to high-rise buildings? Or what is vernacular?
Yes, sir. We do have 2 questions on this.
Acha, okay, because that's a standard question everyone asks me in every presentation. So my question starts, it cannot be. You cannot have a 100-story building in this thought process. But this thought process questions the basic need of going high-rise. Why do we need to go high-rise? If someone has asked a question, I can answer that. But see, there's a concept called degrowth. I don't know if you guys have heard that. There's a concept called degrowth. If you type degrowth, you will find I have attended 2 or 3 conferences, done presentations. I've taken special sessions on degrowth in architecture. There was a NatCon in Raipur also, which was based on degrowth. It questions the fundamental growth pattern of a community. It questions and challenges the fundamental development of economics in a community. And this is all linked to vernacular thought process and the patterns that exist in a community, in a vernacular community. Why do we need to go high rise? I'm not defending. I'm saying you cannot make a 100-story or a high rise in this for sure. If you will make, it will be untenable, it will be unsustainable. The kind of support system that you will need, it will become untenable. So let's not talk of it because it cannot be done. Now, the question which arises, which is the fundamental premise of being vernacular, is why do you need to go high rise? Number one. Is it sustainable or is it not sustainable? Is it local or is it not local? Does what happens to a man, let us say, imagine, who lives on the 100 floors, on the 100th floor, or one who stays on the ground floor? We are all on the ground floor now, let's say, and the one who is on the 100th floor. The height of the 100th floor is about 300 meters or 400 meters, something of that sort. The diameter of his life, which circles on the earth, has increased. Is it affecting his well-being? Is it affecting his behavior? Is it affecting his whatever XYZ? You need to understand. Why do we need to go high-rise? Why can we not have sustainable towns and developments in our cities? Why can we not have optimal development in a city when a city is self-contained of say 5 lakh population or 10 lakh population? Why can we not have satellite towns? What is the need to go vertical, or what is the need to not go horizontal? Is a fundamental question, is a debatable question, which will probably need independent forum to discuss this. But if you want to use these techniques are based on a fundamental premise, which I discussed earlier, that it is very humble, very polite, and very subtle. So if a high-rise building is very humble and polite and subtle, then it can be used. But if it is not, it cannot be used. And if I build a building, which is say 10-story high, which is 40-storied high, I can build it. The materials will build it, but it will be untenable. See, if I build a stone load-bearing wall today, which is about 450 mm thick, and it goes about 2 floors high, it can take the load of 2 floors. Imagine if I go 10 floors or 40 floors, what will be the thickness of the stone wall? So it is untenable. And why are you going high-rise? Because you have shortage of space for whatever, preconceived stupid reasons that we have made ourselves, got ourselves into GDPs and so on and all, so that our space is very tight. If you go to Bombay, if you go to Nariman Point, if you go to the center of a downtown of a city, you will find it very expensive. 10,000 rupees a square feet, 1 lakh rupees a square feet, 2 lakh rupees a square feet. What are these figures, So, and then how can you afford to lose 1.5 feet of wall or 3 feet of wall? So these are paradoxes and questions that we need to be challenged. But if you want to go high rise, it becomes untenable, is what I want to say.
Thank you, sir. I hope all your questions has been answered. The 2 high-rise questions and Kavita ma'am also. One more question from Geeta, architect Geeta, is very inspiring presentation, sir. With the changing aspiration of the new generation, is it relevant, sir, to preserve the structure where it is economically not very viable to the one using it?
No. First of all, thank you for saying it is very inspirational, but I think, let me just see the question. For the changing aspiration of the new generation, is it relevant to preserve the structure? It is economically. See, it is not economically unviable. Although it's a fact that if you go to a village today, making a traditional, typical RCC structure of columns, beams, and brickwork is cheaper than building it in stone or locally available material. And that is because the skill set is not available. When we're doing this project for the first time and we wanted to, you have stone masonry there, stone random rubble masonry there were no masons available. We had to hunt for mason community who used to do this job earlier. We had to convince them to come back. And they were either kirana shop owners, or they had become masons who were doing brickwork, and they were pan thela walas, because they had lost their livelihood, because we as architects had lost the connect to these skills and the very crafts that existed. So we brought them back. That gives them dignity of labor. That gives them a pride in their, expertise that their forefathers and their fathers had, or what they had. And now they're working non-stop on the sites. So when you start doing that, initially it becomes expensive, but in the long run, it does not work out expensive. If you do a very small project in this kind of vocabulary, traditional vocabulary, it will be a little expensive, but if you do on a large scale, it will be cheaper than your RCC construction, number one. So that's a misconception that you should rule out from your minds, that it is expensive. And secondly, with the changing aspirations, this is what a fundamental question that I want to challenge is, why are the aspirations changing and why are they not being rooted to your culture and your context is a question that this new generation needs to answer. In any generation, future generation, present generation, future generation, if you are not rooted to your culture, your thought, and your growth will not be anchored anywhere. Any generation, any person has to be rooted and anchored somewhere. I want to ask a fundamental question. If the aspirations of a generation has changed, will you get married the same way that your forefathers were getting married, with reciting the same shlokas and following the same rituals of a wedding ceremony? Then why should that not change? If that doesn't change, when you go to a temple, when you make a new temple, when you have a deity installed, there's a puja done, for that, sthapna, what you call the sthapna of that deity. That process doesn't change, hasn't changed since ages. Since ages, it hasn't changed. And you do the same thing now when you want to make a temple. You go to a temple or a mosque and pray the same way as your forefathers were praying. If that is not aspiration, then why is that not changing? Why is only architectural thought process changing? Why do you want to make buildings which are unsuitable and criminal to your fellow citizens, wherein you want to, roast them inside glass buildings? Why do you want to do that? So let us rethink of the aspirations of the new generation, wherein you have to be modern, you have to be absolutely contemporary, but your soul has to be rooted in your roots, in your heritage, in your inheritance. And that is one thing which is missing as far as architecture is concerned. You have music. I mean, unfortunately today, you have a classical music concert, or you have a Kathak or a Bharatanatyam recital. You will hardly find audience there in the auditorium. You have to in Bieber or someone else, Coldplay or something, and it'll be stampede there. So something has to be understood by the new generation, wherein we are able to have aspirations which are contemporary, which are modern, which has an outlook which is modern, but yet they are rooted and anchored somewhere. And the same thought process has to be applied to architectural thought process as well. So when this anomaly and this paradox is cleared, this question probably will not arise.
Thank you, Habeeb, sir. I think.
Thank you, sir. Architect Kavita Kamath has just raised her hand. Ma'am, if you want to ask something, please ask. Unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Smita, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Habeeb, sir.
Yes.
Sir, probably in continuation to what you were explaining, if a 235 feet Gopuram can be built with vernacular architecture, why can't we build at least 100 feet high-rise building? No, there is a point that it was uninhabitable. It was not inhabitable, sorry, but just a small query, sir, because like you said, we have to impose on the new generation that our concepts, our olden day concepts can always be used. And it has to be, it's a very interesting concept. So what is your point of view, sir?
No, I'm not saying it cannot be built. It can be built. I mean, Gopurams were built. The Qutub Minar was built.
Exactly.
It is as tall as a pretty tall building structure. Whether they are fit enough to be inhabited is a question which is a different question.
Exactly.
What I was trying to tell and understand was that, I mean, when you are, for example, making a 235 feet high or 400 feet high structure, the base increases, number one. So the usable space, the carpet area reduces. Get my point? So the footprint of the building increases. And the reason because we don't have that liberty or the freedom to have a larger footprint. That's why you're going vertical in today's time. So that becomes untenable, is what I was saying. But if you give me land, I will build a structure in the same technique, which is 400 feet, 500 feet tall. But allow me the freedom to have that large footprint.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Habeeb sir. Thank you for this wonderful inaugural talk. And before we start our COA TRC, I would like to, invite